Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead. I hope you're having a fantastic day because it's starting to feel like spring this week. I'm sitting down right now because I just hung some swarm traps for our bees, but I want to talk about plants that, you can't just grow anything in your yard. And I've learned that the hard way. And if I can save somebody a little bit of time, I hope I can do that today. We're just getting going for the spring. Everything is planted at this point. And with everything going on in the world today and all that, and I know it's planting season for everybody, this is something that you really should be thinking about. Something that weighs heavy on my mind each year, and every year that I garden, I put it together more and more in my head. Meaning I come across stuff that just doesn't grow well for me. Either one, my climate is not very good for it, or two, I just can't get the knack of it and I may not care about it. And for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to totally leave out stuff that you're like, hey, I don't like it, I'm not going to grow it, like whatever. That's not what I'm overly concerned about. I think everybody can make that decision. I don't grow cauliflower because I don't like it. I like it one way, and it's not worth it to take up space in my garden. But, earlier, it was last week when I'm filming this. You're going to see it later, but the whole phones being down and stuff, I know that some of you were affected by it. They said that it was a solar flare. One report came out and said that. And then one report said that it was a coding thing. Now, it may have been a coding thing, but I can tell you it wasn't a solar flare because America was pointed the opposite direction when that solar flare hit the earth. So the reason why I bring that up is not because I'm some crazy conspiracy-minded person, even though there is a little bit of hoodoo there. But you have to remember, this is why I started gardening in the beginning. It wasn't so I could stockpile all my food. It was simply so I knew how to grow my food when the time came for me to be able to grow it. And in the process, as we've gone through 2021 or 2020 and 21, when things were a little bit difficult, different natural disasters and stuff like that, we've grown to depend on our garden. And I don't want to waste any time or space in our garden whatsoever. I want it to be I want to be as much of a well-oiled machine as possible, meaning I want to be growing as much as I can of what I like and not wasting my time on stuff that just won't grow. So the first category is going to be just knowing your space, like where things will and won't grow in your space. And so as I step back, hopefully you can see in my garden all this shade that periodically hits. And this is a free, simple way to narrow down what and where you plant. And so I know in my garden, these beds, and I'm not so sure about this bed. I think this is a new bed. I think it may be a little bit better. But these two beds here get the least amount of sunlight in this section of my garden. So it's a little bit harder for stuff to grow here in the fall. Because in the spring and summer, it actually does pretty good. But then over here in the summertime, this is where it gets most of the sun. It's hot. But in the winter, it's a little bit warmer and it gets most of the sun. So we have to adjust. What you'll see in my garden is I switch my sweet potatoes, because the sweet potatoes like it hot. They like it dry. They like as much sun as possible. I plant them on this side of my garden. So I put them in this bed. And hopefully next year, I'll put them in that bed over there. And then I'll flop back and forth, back and forth. Now, I may take a gamble next year because I have a new bed and see how it grows and plant them in this bed next year. And my goal would hopefully to be go back and forth this way. But I know that they will grow better over here. Just like if I put my broccoli over here in the fall, it's going to get way too hot. So I can plant it over here and keep it cooler in the fall to get it more situated. And this is a great way. So there's different parts of my garden that I know I cannot plant or should not plant certain things because it won't grow the best to its ability. Now for the next category, and this is a tough one to swallow. This is stuff that just won't grow. And I bring you over here to my cattle panel because this was a dream that I had. And my dream was to grow an indeterminate tomato that would grow over it, and then I could just walk through and pluck it out. That was my dream. As a matter of fact, that's all I ever wanted out of my garden. And then I started growing indeterminate tomatoes. And I always grew determinate tomatoes, even from off Jump Street. I've always grown them. But because of my area, because of the heat, and because of the humidity, I've learned that indeterminate tomatoes, albeit they may produce a lot longer, they don't survive here long enough to get the benefits of it. So I really need to focus on determinate tomatoes, and that's okay. Now that I know that, it's game on, baby. You know what I mean? Like this year, I didn't plant any indeterminate tomatoes. This is the first year. Like it took me 4 years of trying it to just finally being like, no more, I'm done. So what we did is we went back to the drawing board and just started over. And we did all determinate tomatoes. We got some heirloom determinate tomatoes so we could save the seed. We got some hybrid ones so we don't need to save the seed, but they produce a lot more. So, you know, we were able to just eliminate that category altogether, save ourselves some time and money, and get more production. And you're going to see that this year. Hopefully we'll see that. I'm sure we will, because my determinate tomatoes, like I grow Romos every year, I get plenty. I don't even need to really plant a second crop of tomatoes. If I put the first crop up right, I'm pretty good. So that's really where we stand with all that. Question time. Is there a vegetable in your garden that you just cannot get to grow? If so, leave it in the comments. Or if there's one you've decided to totally abandon, leave it in the comments and why. Because I think this is what helps us become better gardeners when we just realize like, hey, this isn't gonna work for us. It's time to move on. Look at the garden and you see that it's fully planted, and it's, at the time of this recording, it's like March 2nd, I think. And so we look at this and it's like, hey, we've got all this cabbage and kale and Brussels sprouts and broccoli, onions, garlics, potatoes, lettuces, rutabagas. And it was hard. It took me a long time to figure this out, but I've had it for quite a few years now. You can't just grow this stuff whenever in my area. Now, if you live up north, I stand as a big proponent is basically your spring garden could be your most amazing garden year almost throughout the entire season. You may have perfect climate to continue to grow cabbages all through the summer. We can't do that, and that's okay. Just like you, if you live way up north, you probably can't grow stuff like Seminole pumpkins, black-eyed peas, maybe even sweet potatoes, okra. Sometimes you don't get enough growing season for peppers in some areas. And it may be tempting to try and cheat the system and just grow it anyways. But let's face it, sometimes you just can't grow it, and you're better off to just accept it and then focus on what you can grow a lot of. And you're gonna get so much more. Sometimes the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, you know what I mean? It's crazy to think about it like that, but sometimes it is what it is. And we have to accept that. And I know there's a lot of people, they pull up their peppers and they bring them inside and overwinter them, and more power to you. I don't do that because we have such a small amount of time in which we can grow certain vegetables that I want to maximize everything I can outside and make it easier on myself. Does that mean that I'm saying don't use covers to try and extend stuff to squeeze out a little bit of time? Don't use shade? Absolutely not. I think that is a great way to kind of bend the rules a little bit, because I'm all about bending the rules. And putting stuff in the ground earlier, employing these different methods and methodologies in order to get your garden to grow, to get the biggest and best harvest and the most harvest out of what you can. But for me personally, I would rather get, let's say, so last year was actually the first year, and it definitely won't be the last, that I planted Seminole pumpkins. Known to love the heat, absolutely known to. It's better off for me to focus on growing that and get one plant produce, I think 10 different Seminole pumpkins that we could harvest, we could store for a while, versus doing something like a carving pumpkin where you're gonna get a pumpkin to carve. you know. Something that we struggle to grow here, and that's just me. It's not my climate, that's just me. I struggle to grow. So I try to stay on top of that, you know. It's like trying to grow rutabagas in the middle of summer, like it just doesn't really work well. So I'm gonna focus on something different that's actually gonna benefit me and benefit my family in the long run. One can say, if you've been following the channel or been listening to the Backyard Gardens podcast for any amount of time, one can say that the Brussels sprouts is a prime example in which I should just back off, because I tried 5 years or 4 years now to get, this is my 4th year to get a harvest. And we have been harvesting Brussels sprouts now for about a month. And you can see we've got Brussels sprouts in all the plants that are left. We're basically just using this as a storage unit at this point. I would say that that argument is very valid, and I respect that. But there is always going to be one that you are determined to learn. And I think that's a really good way to do it. Let me try and turn out of the wind here. I think that being able to grow these, it's another winter crop for us. If this was a summer crop, I would not waste all that time growing it. Hands down, I would just move on to the next project and not even worry myself about it. But we're not in that situation. We wanted to grow Brussels sprouts, and we figured it out this year. So now we can just improve little by little. This year will be the telling year if we're going to continue to do it year after year.